Hello everyone, I am Anushree Sharma, Senior Manager, Research and Content Strategist at People Matters, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion, which is building a skill ecosystem in digital first companies. Now, over the past few years, the startup ecosystem has seen many changes with the influx of large amounts of domestic and foreign funds, consolidation activities, innovation, evolving technologies, and a growing domestic market. In fact, in 2021, Indian VCs believe that deal flow will continue to be robust as global funds remain keen to invest in the Indian startup ecosystem. However, one of the greatest threats that digital first companies are facing today is the talent shortage. In this scenario, how do these fast growing companies can make sure that they don't hinder their growth plans with a shortage of skills? In this webcast by People Matters and Disprz today, we will look at how digital first companies can build new skilling strategies to boost growth. The session will delve into points like what skills matters the most, what are some of the roadblocks and recommendation to bridge the skills gap, what are some of the traditional approaches that are no longer enough to bridge this talent crisis, and what are some of the new paths to build these skills and bring in the right talent into your organization. So, before I invite our panelists, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Disperse team for always being in the forefront of the conversation, for supporting us to put today's agenda together, and for bringing the community to advance forward as we talk about winning in the 20s. Now, without any further ado, I would like to invite Margaret D'Souza, who's the head of HR at Zeta. She
Hi.
partners with the leadership team. Hi, Margaret. She partners with the leadership team to design effective solutions to enhance organizational effectiveness and ensure that it is aligned with the organization's goals and objectives. Margaret has been instrumental in building and sustaining a positive and progressive work culture across all businesses. And with over 16 years of experience, she is well versed in designing and implementing processes, mapping and introducing best practices in various HR disciplines. Welcome, Margaret. It's so great to have you in this session.
Likewise, Anushree.
Also joining us today is Subramaniam Vishwanathan, also known as Subbu, who is the co-founder and CEO of Discourse. As a serial entrepreneur, Subbu loves translating ideas into products and products for companies. His early two ventures were in the enterprise and edtech space. Subbu is an alumnus of IIT Madras, ISB Hyderabad, and McKinsey. Welcome, Subbu. So, thank you so much for taking out time for this session.
Thank you, Anushree. Thank you very much for the introduction. Look forward to the conversation.
Yes, Subbu. I'm hoping to be a very exciting discussion. And so, before we get into the conversation with our panelists, I would like to invite our audience to share their questions in the chat box with our panelists today. We will try to take as many questions as possible at the end of the conversation. So, perfect. Margaret, maybe I can start with you. As we start the conversation, I would like to understand from you, with the agenda, which is focusing on startups today. And given the rapid digital transformation, what, according to you, are the key skill sets that digital first companies are looking for these days?
So I will answer this in two parts. All right. So I think it is very evident right now with the way COVID has hit us and the way that organizations have today accelerated their digital disruption journey. And I don't think it is limited to startups alone today. I think every organization is going through their journey basis their sector and their segment. All right. Now, having said that, with the way business and technology and in turn new skills are evolving, we are growing at such a rapid space that I think it's evident there's enough of matter out there that people are talking about that today there is already a gap between new digital talent jobs, which is almost 8 times that of the current fresh talent pool. And it is evident, Subbu can also add to this, that it is evident that in the next couple of years, it is going to widen. And I think the latest NASCOM report also mentioned that it could be almost 20%. 20 times. All right. Now, keeping that aside, what are some of the skills? Because I want to make sure that we also share some of our challenges, some of the skills that we've hired in the last 12 months, 18 months, not necessarily because of COVID, but because we are in our digital journey ourselves. But we've hired for, developer advocate, information developers. We've indexed on very different roles, or, the definition of, solution architects, technical program managers. So that has been our journey in terms of of course, data science, machine learning, and, the likes of the newer technologies, the emerging technologies, like I call it. Now, I think a lot of other organizations have also gone through their journey of hiring individuals in AI, in blockchain, in cloud, in data analytics. But now coming to the second piece, where I truly believe that it is not the technology you need to focus on when you're looking at talent. You need to, like, I got attached to this word called power skills, where, the rate at which technology is evolving. Okay, what is today the hype, tomorrow will something else will take over. So you will find a lot of skills that are making the ranks in terms of the top listing in terms of key skills. But what you really need to focus on, the people that you're hiring. And technology and craft is important, but you need to understand what are the very key skills. You will look at people which will stand through for the test of time. So when you're looking at people, you need to evaluate people, especially folks who are going to work in the startup space, who are going to witness hyper growth, who are going to witness, high risk, high pivots. They need to be able to adapt to change. They can't be, restricted by, I won't be able to, I don't like change, I need my goals set for the year. They need to be flexible, they need to be high on problem solving, right? When I say problem solving, it is known, unknown, complex problems that, that could change every day. So it is, adapt to change, it is flexibility, it is problem solving. And one of the things that is the utmost critical, because the way we were literally thrown into another virtual world, is being able to communicate and collaborate and be really high on interpersonal skills. And for that matter, I'll just close with, this point that we ourselves have been hiring people who are high on collaboration, because it's important today. So
Yeah.
this to me is how I look at key skills. I call them power skills, but you look at people with this skill set, you will get, they will, when you look at people who are, and the single most important, skill that we internally also cherish a lot is people who are constantly learning.
True.
Because if they constantly learn, they will pursue mastery in what they're doing today, plus they'll evolve and learn, they'll keep learning.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Slightly longish answer.
No problem, Margaret. But you highlighted a very critical point of, given the fact that shelf life of skills is getting very short, and it's not only the technology that organization need to focus. Given, recently we were struck with the pandemic, and it brought a lot of skills like adaptability, collaboration, and these are also some of the power skills that organization need to focus on. Subbu, I would invite you before you reflect on the point of continuous learning and also your views around the shelf life of skills. Given the fact you are leading one of the growth companies, digital companies, and you have been working with a lot of digital first companies, uh, there are a lot of roles that have evolved and have come on the forefront, like product roles, like leadership, and the need of these digital first organization to compete with the MNCs. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the skills that you have observed that these are the skills that are critical to build in the workforce when we need to compete?
Sure. So firstly, let me first tell you how we as Disprz think about skills. We've actually building our proprietary skill model. We're calling it the Disprz atomic skill model, where think about atoms, subatomic particles like protons, neutrons, electrons, then atoms. And then there are molecules. Likewise, we've actually broken down the world of skills into subatomic skills, atomic skills, and molecular skills. And that is on one axis, and we've also classified them into whether a skill is a functional skill, is a leadership skill, or a digital skill, or a meta skill. So what Margaret referred to as a power skill, you can also, we call it a meta skill. I think we are essentially saying the same thing. But if you think about this as a pyramid, right? So let me share my screen here. A very simple and a simple way to think about the skill pyramid. Here we go. So if you see here, at the foundation of the world of skills is something called meta skills. Now, meta skills are they enhance or diminish your ability to learn other skills. So the example that Margaret gave, the ability to learn, we call it learning agility. That is a very important meta skill. Likewise, data insighting, the ability to take insight from data. That's an example of a meta skill. Emotional intelligence, how do you respond and react to situations? That is a meta skill. So that is the foundation of the pyramid. On top of that is a bunch of leadership skills, starting with leading self. So time management, self-awareness, these are leading self skills. And then there are leading team skills. How do you manage teams? How do you delegate work? How do you resolve conflict? How do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback? Those are all skills under leading teams. And then there are leading organization skills, which is how do you build high performance teams? How do you acquire talent at scale? So this is the second level. The third level are functional foundational skills. So if you take marketing, for example, market segmentation and market analysis. If you take engineering and software engineering, for example, data architecture, how do you actually build systems of scale? Those are functional foundational skills that don't change even if a new technological revolution comes in. So the foundational principles of designing a scalable system in the 1960s and now are the same, except that they might be built on a different technology stack in the 1960s, but whereas now it's in a different stack. But the foundation of good software, that's what we call functional foundational skills. Those are different. And then at the top of the pyramid is the contextual foundational functional skill. So these are the high velocity skills like Python, or today it might be called Python, tomorrow it might be called a Cobra. I'm just giving an example. It doesn't matter. But if you think about it, it's actually a pyramid. And the reason we call it a pyramid is because as you go from bottom to the top, you have reducing fungibility. So meta skills will help you whether you're in the 21st century or the 22nd century or the 50th century. Emotional intelligence is going to help you become a better professional, whichever part of the timeline you're actually born and you're actually working. Likewise, leadership skills are going to be even more helpful. And on top of that, functional foundational skills, they also have a fair amount of fungibility. So if you look at great marketers, they have fantastic consumer understanding, and consumer understanding is what we call a functional foundational skill. But when it comes to a context, how to apply that consumer understanding in a physical first world or in a digital first world is a contextual functional skill. So this is the skill pyramid. Now to your specific question on what skills are going to be in demand, right? And this framework works across industries and across different categories of skills, be it a functional skill, be it a leadership skill. This framework sort of works. Now let me first take a look at product and engineering, right? So our team has looked at data from jobs. So we've analyzed jobs, job postings, and we've actually extracted skills from there just to see which skills are actually trending. So I'll just give you a few small insights. Firstly, when it comes to product and engineering, the most in-demand occupation or a role is that of a software engineer, not surprisingly, followed by a software QA engineer. So QA is getting as important as software actually. The ratio is typically 1:2 or 1:3. And then there's business analyst, data engineers, and business intelligence manager. If you see clearly, that 3 out of the top 5 roles involve data. These are the top 5 occupations that are in demand over the last 10 months. Now, when we talk about within QA, right? Software quality manager is an interesting occupation as well. So amongst engineering management, between software engineering manager and software quality managers have a higher demand. Now, if you go to the world of skills, interestingly, again, going back to my point of functional foundational skills, right? SQL is still the most top trending skill based on data from job sites. And SQL is a very foundational skill. You can use SQL to analyze relational data, NoSQL data, or any other unstructured data. So a skill of 1974 is still the #1 skill as far as jobs are concerned, followed by problem solving, followed by analytics. And this is just a tech example. Now, if I have to talk about sales and customer experience, right? On sales, the #1 skill that companies are looking for is how to actually sell virtually, how to virtual selling and virtual customer engagement is the #1 skill, because everything is going to get virtual today, even if things come back to normal. And unfortunately, due to Omicron, the new normal might get delayed, but whatever it is, the ability to sell virtually is the #1 sales skill that sales leaders are looking for. Likewise, in customer experience, the #1 skill that they're looking for is customer orientation. It's not knowledge of a particular product. It's not knowledge of a particular industry. It's actually customer orientation. So if you see here, the power skills that Margaret said, the meta skills like we call it, they still roll the roost.
Thanks, Subbu, for sharing that. I think that gives a complete picture of where skills are heading towards and where organizations need to focus. Margaret, I'll come back to you. Given the fact that you mentioned about how important it is to not only focus on technology skills but also on the past skills, and then why it is important to invest into continuous learning. So, given the fact that from for a unicorn startup like Zeta, which is also a digital driven organization, what are some of the roadblocks that you had to overcome when the world of work was undergoing going, a lot of change, and it's still undergoing a lot of change? So what were some of the roadblocks when your organization were looking to hire talent for a specific skill or building that skills internally?
Okay, so again, over here, the challenge is uh, existing talent and new talent. So when it comes to hiring from the market, of course, there is a shortage in the skill and the craft maturity that you want, and even more for some of the key or the essential skills or the new skills that are emerging. So we did identify. I mean, that is the problem statement of every organization today. How we try to attack it is that we also have a very we believe that we have a relatively higher even hiring bar, because we want to make sure that every talent coming in is it is the best in talent across the industry, so that you have when like minds work together, you the outcome is resultant, it's very higher than the output is much higher because of the talent that you have. Now, keeping that in mind, what we did do is, there's that much you can do with talent outside in the market, but we try to understand how can we go to across markets, in the sense that move beyond fintech, go to other markets. How can we hire from adjacent markets, hire for capability, and even though it's not a exact fit for the role, but if we hire for capability because of those power skills, and probably functional knowledge or I mean, not really the when we look at a maturity curve of those competencies, even if they are not an expert level, but if they have that capability and they have a high potential to get groomed, that is also something that we were okay with. And you have to do things like this because you're not always going to get the cream de la cream of the market, and you will sometimes have to put your bets on capability. And we've seen that across all of our roles at Zeta, where we have, in fact, we've seen a very high flux of entrepreneurs that we have taken on board because they are sold with that promise. I mean, it is, we have like a history of people who've left, the organization and started off and spun off, organizations of their own. Because somewhere we feel we're incubating that entrepreneurial mindset. So with that same mindset, we have a lot of people that we've taken on board who've come in with that collaborative mindset, who've tried and tested things before, now want to come into the the working world, and give them that space, that opportunity to own products which tomorrow can spin off into independent businesses in themselves. So you need to think a little abstract, so that you are not overcommitting everybody the same promise, but everybody has a different journey within the organization. Now, when it comes to internal talent, again, the same, when you're talking about roles which are becoming redundant, when you're looking at, like, for example, we went through we are going through our journey of, how in terms of DevOps, in terms of, adopting Kubernetes, you talk about QA, you talk about any of these, roles, you have, when you hire talent, they of course come with some maturity in craft, and you want to make sure that people who've been here in the company long enough, you keep internally mobilizing them, you keep attaching them to projects, to domain experts, where their skill is also getting upgraded, such that their skills are always relevant to the market, and even more important, always relevant to the newer talent coming in. So there's a lot that you need to do to overcome that roadblock, but these are two very evident roadblocks. One is the new talent coming in, and one is always looking at how do you upskill, cross skill. I think cross skill is more the word right now, but your internal talent.
Thanks for sharing that, Margaret. So we'll come back to you. Margaret has shared her roadblocks, the company was facing while filling for the talent crisis or the shortage of skills. You have worked with a lot of organization in building that right kind of skills or bridging that skill gap. What, according to you, were some of the roadblocks that those organizations were facing, and what are some of the things that HR or maybe the L&D professionals need to take care of while working towards bridging the skill gap?
Sure, I think like Margaret said, getting the workforce ready for today's demanding jobs, making them skill ready for today's roles and tomorrow's roles is the biggest challenge. So first of all, there are new roles that are getting created, and the current roles are also getting disrupted because of digitalization. So sales is one example that I gave you. Somebody who's spent 15 years doing field selling now has to learn how to build a relationship through Zoom. Very difficult. Likewise, so which means these are entirely new kinds of skills. Likewise, in the engineering world, some new skills, that new roles that Margaret spoke about, DevOps is emerging. Likewise, there's a data protection officer, which is a new role. There is a chief digital officer itself is actually a new role. These are just a couple of examples. There are tons and tons of roles. Solution architect, then information security analyst, penetration tester, vulnerability assessment engineer, things like that. These are entirely new roles with new skills that are required. So you will not site reliability engineer. You will not find these in the market. So you will have to first take stock of your existing talent, understand whether their career aspirations are aligned with switching to these roles, and not everybody is interested in such a big move. Some of them are very comfortable. Let me continue to be a software engineer. It's paying me well. Some of them will be open to new shifts, right? So getting them to cross skill and reskill, that's a big challenge, and the challenge is further accentuated not because they don't have while they may have the willingness to learn, as well as the learning agility to be able to relearn new things. A lack of time is a huge problem. Yeah. So in our company, we've tried things like learning day, where we take one day off or at least half a day off, and where we learn a new concept. We haven't still cracked how to do it perfectly. Right now, we take a single concept, and as founders or senior product leaders, we take something entirely new, like gaming or graph database, and then make everybody learn it in a group. So that also builds a sense of community, but also exposes them to newer technologies. So learning day is one way to systematically carve out a calendar for reskilling. Because unless you take it out of your work hours, it's not going to happen. I think if you tell somebody that work for 50 hours a week, and by the way, you also get ready for a new role, it's not going to happen. It's not fair to the employee either. So you'll have to take time out of your current role and provide time for skilling and reskilling.
Thanks Subbu, for sharing that. I think it's
I would add, taking time out today is become, you get such a face in terms of, where is the time. So I could completely relate to to how do you make that time, but I think that is a mystery in itself. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. In fact, Margaret, I want to follow with this, Subbu, the point he mentioned about, taking out time. It's also very important for, in fact, the line managers to also take some amount of ownership to understand whether the employees are getting time to, learn or build those skills, taking care whether they have right amount of, the bandwidth to take up the course. So how are you solving this sort of challenge? I think this is a universal challenge in all the organization.
So what we're trying to do right now internally, Anushri, is we're trying to unlearn some of the learning, conventional principles. Principles will remain the same, but the modes of how you operate it, we're trying to unlearn that. When it comes to learning, what we did is we took to the drawing board last year in terms of what to us is learning, and what we realized is that if we truly want to be in that dream set of companies, or if we want to have an EVP where people say that this is the place I want to learn and grow, what does it take to be there, right? Because clearly today compensation and all of the elements are becoming hygiene factors, and the single most two elements that are going to be important for the workforce of today, the new learners or the modern workers that I call them, is going to be where they see merit in how much can I learn and grow within that organization, because everything else has become hygiene. Okay, with that premise, if I want to make sure that this is considered as a learning first organization, what are the critical pillars? And I'm sharing this in terms of this, these are the pillars that we are operating with at Zeta. So one of the pillars is that we want to make sure that we democratize learning. What does it mean to democratize learning? Today, we want to make sure that, you know, an individual has all the resources, the ability to make their learning decisions. The minute you have, and we've not got it right, we're in that journey, but the thought process is that we want to ensure that a learner has the resources, the and can make their own choices. They don't need to check with their manager. They don't need to, they have enough of, the environment is getting, the environment around them is, getting built for learning, the learning platform, it's for them to consume. And that's where one of the important steps that we realized is that we need to make sure that even the tools and platforms that we are providing them is creating that experience for them, to create a bar raiser for them to want to go to that learning platform. And that's how our journey with Disprz started, where we evaluated almost 20 plus learning platforms from across the globe in India, and we realized that we want to be very clear that it has to be a phenomenal user experience, right from understanding how do we curate learning journeys, how do people peer have a platform for peer sharing of knowledge, how do they look at their own, how do their managers, leadership look at data in terms of understanding how is learning working within the organization. And that's been our journey this year of laying the foundation of at least getting our rules and systems right. We did Disprz, we got a Udemy. So like this, we want to make sure that we're making the right investments to make sure that we can help bring learning to people. And then from there comes our next pillars, that then what do you do in terms of making learning a ritual and a habit? And I know everybody has the same problem statement, that how do we get people to carve out time for learning? And that's when you try to think from their lens, that why is it that you give 4 reminders and people will still not come to even a virtual classroom setting, or they'll not even take a learning program? But what is it that makes them come to that learning program, whether it is an online course, it is the depth in matter, brevity, the bite size learning, what is it? And you need to start thinking on those lines. So we also operated with aspects that a build versus buy model. That means we will only build internally what is key to our organization that nobody else can replicate. That means domain knowledge, product knowledge. But for craft, can we leverage on whatever this course already has to offer? Can we collaborate and bring on more tools? Can we bring some of the best experts who are influencers out there, that we just say that, listen, we have only 20 seats and we tried it, we have only 20 seats and this is the influencer? You will have people who will be up for grabs. But you have to think, right, that what do you really want? Because today you go online, people, there is a dearth of information of what is there to learn. You don't want to bring just one more custom, you need to custom tailor it, not just bring one more standard program to people, right? And you know along after these two pillars, the next most important pillar is, then with the first two pillars, making sure that you're augmenting their growth and their career. Because today we have to, and all organizations need to understand, we have to unlearn one dimension or one direction learning paths, right? Today, if you're talking to a business analyst, you're talking to a product analyst, that person's growth path for a product analyst is not necessarily a product manager. This person, by the skills that this person adapts, this person could become a data analyst or go into a data science team. So we need to start thinking matrix careers. We need to make sure that you give them enough of avenues to say that, listen, if you want to become a product manager, these are all the different sources you can come from, but this is what it takes to become a product manager. Or you do the reverse thing, that if you're in a terminal growth, if you're a QA, you're a PSC, you're a project manager, this is your horizon of what you can move into. But don't index on the fact that this is a terminal growth role. So it's very important to think on these 3 lines. If you
Thanks.
want,
Thanks.
I can share a few.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the follow-up call, I can share a few of these interventions that we've done internally. You let me know.
Sure, sure. Before we come back to that examples, Margaret, and understand more about the intervention, Subbu, Margaret highlighted some really great practices about, making learning custom tailored to what the employees need and to what organizations need. I would also like to understand how Disperse is helping other, the organization adopting those best practices to bridge this talent gap.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is to have a clear understanding of career paths in a company. Um, this is something actually the large companies are good at, but startups sort of don't pay enough attention to the fast-growing startups because because it's always a fire and there is always a pressure to grow. So I think the first thing companies should do, especially if you're a fast-growing startup and if you've reached a scale of 300 or 500 employees, is to first create career paths. So, for example, at Disprz, when we reached about 125 people, we took a step back and said, let's just create career paths. So we went pillar by pillar, or we call a department a pillar in our company, pillar by pillar, and we created the career paths. And that also opens the conversation for what is the difference between a senior software engineer and a principal engineer. Where to draw the line, where is the bar, etc. And that also creates complete clarity within the team. So when we were 125 people, we actually created 150 roles in our company. So about 60 of them we did not have anybody, but we still created those roles so that everybody knows that somebody can grow into these roles. So the first thing companies should do is create a modern, future-ready role matrix. Like I said, for small companies, for startups, that doesn't exist, and for large companies, it exists, but it's outdated. So it's a problem in both sides. So that's where Disperse actually helps you create a very modern role dictionary through a product called Skills Architect. We've analyzed about 40 industries. Technology is one of them. We give you a very current picture of what roles should exist in a company. So I think that is the first step. The second step is for each of these roles, map the skills. Again, take a data-led approach. Disperse has created a product for actually creating that visibility. Once these two are created, the next step is assess people on the skills. Either based on somebody's present roles or the role that they want to get to, assess people. And assessments, you can do a very complicated skill assessment or very simply do a simple 360. But make sure a 360 is not subjective. So don't say rate Subbu on a scale of 5. Say this is what 3 means, this is what 4 means, this is what 5 means, this is what 2 means. And now, based on this, now rate Subbu. That is a better way to rate because somebody's 4 might be somebody's 3. Now you made it very specific. So just ask manager the question, just ask player the question. That will give you a sense of where the skill levels are. And from there, you can then start your skill development program. And to me, learning and watching online courses, consuming online courses is a good way to learn. But an even better way to learn is to actually give people real projects. So if somebody wants to become a product manager from a software engineer, you check whether they have the fundamentals. Just put them on, make them a associate product manager on their first project, right? And then tell them here are online resources that you will need to consume. So that then things will automatically happen because they are forced to learn. And you also give them transparency on these are the skills that you need to learn, and you also give them the right digital platform for your company. Then all three things have come together. You created the right opportunity, you've created visibility on skills, you've created the right content availability, and then magic can happen.
Thanks, Subbu. Margaret, I'll come back to you and want to understand. So, Subbu mentioned a very important point about organizations need to do away with the traditional approaches of skilling and learning. So, with respect to your organization, did you shed some of those traditional practices and invented some new ways of building those skills, or you ventured into new arenas of workforce skilling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I wanted to cover in the previous segment, but I wanted Subbu to also add in because I'm sure, what he's witnessing with his experience with most organizations is, far more relevant. And I couldn't stop myself from saying, +1 to that. So one of the things we need to be very clear that, when we talk about skilling, the immediate definition to it is always craft. And one of the things that we need to agree on is that when it comes to a person being able to operate in an environment, you need to focus equally on domain, equally on product, and equally on craft. And craft could be technical, could be behavioral, could be leadership. All right. Now, when it comes to this, we have taken a stab at a lot of different principles in terms of learning, that instead of creating a one-day program, we're moving away from one-day programs. We're creating learning paths, where if we say that, okay, we're creating a learning path on a particular topic, whether it's leadership, whether it is on a particular skill, or whether it is what does it take to become a really good, effective product manager, because that is one of the hottest skills today, apart from your software engineers. And what does it take? So then what you do is you craft a journey. So when you craft a journey, you say, okay, fine, these are the courses. You craft that journey. We've been trying to do that on Disprz itself, where you craft the journey. You say that, okay, fine, you'll have a master class, you'll have a webinar, you'll have these white papers, you'll have this assessment, you'll have this one-on-one with an expert. So when you do all of that, you are trying to bring in top recall of some topic repeatedly, and you're also helping them utilize that, or try it out at their work and come back. Or even if it's not a skill they have to use today, you're giving them assessments and projects to at least test it out. So it is slightly long-winded than this approach of this is one day training, which does not serve that purpose. So one is we're focusing on more long-term latching on to concepts. Now with that, we also understand today in the way we are working, people don't take time out if it's only specifically to go to a platform or go to a training program. It has to be weaved in into various other interventions that we're doing. So what are some of the things that we've been trying to do to make sure that there is immense learning in every specific intervention? For example, we do tech conclaves once every year. So in these tech conclaves, it's a 2-day event where every single team gets to do a retrospective. It's like an engineering summit of sorts, where everybody gets to come and do a retrospective of what did they do, what did they develop, how did they automate, what are the newer technologies they use, and they showcase it. It allows other teams to say, hey, I want to try that out, I want to learn it, hey, we do the same thing, why did we not think of that before? So it's a day to reflect, retrospect, and also celebrate. And in that, a lot of learning happens. Along with that, we try to do at least twice a year, we do Zeta Hacks. Although for Zeta Hacks, the resultant impact is accelerating business initiatives, but what happens in that bargain is that you're bringing people out of their routine work and you're making them come up with creative solutions, where people don't have time for spending on learning. You'll see them do a 48-hour marathon to make sure that they can, even after 48 hours and spending 2 sleepless nights, they'll still be super fresh while presenting. But imagine the amount of learning that has happened when they built something which they've probably not done in their regular work, right? So that's the second case. Then we are spending, I think this is something that we've shaped up in the last year alone in terms of focusing on developer experience, which is why, these new roles of developer advocate, information developer, because our products are constantly, changing. We're introducing new products, new features, sometimes almost every quarter, every semester. We have new people joining the workforce, and we have crazy amount of knowledge with existing employees. So this is like a triangle, and we need to make sure that there is somebody focusing on the flow and exchange of information within the organization. So our developer experience team focuses on multiple things. It's not only related to domain and product knowledge, but they also work on craft in terms of working with the SMEs to understand a day in the life of a particular individual, so that other people learn from that, right? And apart from that, I think the way in which we operate, which is very common to startups today in terms of adopting the tribe, squads, chapters model, where there is immense learning in that, because you're working with people at horizontals, at verticals, you're working with domain experts, chapter experts, and there is, the chapter expert makes, the chapter owner makes sure that, in your domain, in your function, in your related craft, you're getting enhanced. Your squad owners making sure domain and product is taken care of. So imagine the amount of, because we need to work at a pace where we need to be super agile, right? So all of these initiatives, and there's Tech Thursday, and there are a couple of others where we try to ensure that if you don't come to learning, learning comes to you in some shape or form, right? Happy to share more of them probably later, but these are some of the very key top things that we believe that also augments learning within the organization.
Yeah, just a couple of things I'd like to add. So, see, she mentioned, Margaret mentioned Zeta Hacks. We do something similar as well. We do hack days, and these hack days are cross-functional events, not just engineering events. And we also do all hands engineering days. So we had one last week. In fact, it was fantastic in a remote first world to actually have people come together under one roof. We took the pain of getting 75 people travel from all parts of the country in the same office for 3 or 4 days to build stuff together. That automatically creates a learning environment. So it's not courses, it's not necessarily projects. It's just getting the right people together. That automatically creates a sense of community, and a lot of learning happens in a community or in a social setting. I think we lost Anushri.
Yeah, clearly, Subbu, between you and me, one has to return moderator.
So why don't you go first? Okay, so I think let's go to the questions then. So Margaret, can you highlight what are some of the success metrics you're applying to gauge the success of the learning programs?
You'll always hear very unconventional things from me, because maybe I'm after working with founders, you start to challenge everything that is in place. So we have been trying to, although today, with the way systems and tools are built, we are looking at learning hours, how much time are people devoting to learning, but we want to move to slightly more impactful metrics. We haven't got it figured yet, although today I can name some of the very common metrics that we're following. But when I say the impact of learning, I would possibly want to talk about how much we're internally mobilizing individuals, how much are we leveraging this and it's increasing the effectiveness or the productivity of the organization. So there are a lot of themes floating around. I would say today we are still stuck in that journey between operating within the boundaries of what we have today that we can gauge, but we've not yet got it right in terms of how do we tie that end-to-end loop.
Yeah, so let me add to that. Our next generations of products are actually coming up with better and better learning metrics. So we've now come up with a metric called skill score. A skill score is a number from 0 to 100 for every skill. So for example, let's say Anushri is a facilitator. So effective facilitation is a skill. Now there are 4 proficiency levels, and for each proficiency level there is a score from 0 to 100. And we measure that score through assessments and through peer feedback and 360-degree feedback. So whenever a program starts, we know what the baseline score is. So it's, let's say, 40 on 100. And after 3 months, we do the assessment again. And then we measure the delta. And the delta is, we build some good mathematics into it. The delta comes from, if you invest some time in learning, your learning agility score contributes to your skill score. In addition, the assessments also contribute. So we measure an improvement in skill score as a way to prove that your learning programs have worked. And we've extended skill score a little further. So a person needs to have about 7 or 8 functional skills, 3 or 4 leadership skills, 5 to 6 meta skills. So it's about skill dictionary of about 15 to 20 skills. Now, an average of all of this is what you call your role score. So very simply, it tells you as a customer service manager or as a developer advocate or as a data scientist on 100 where you stand. Very simple. And if that score improves over time, you know that this has actually resulted in some sort of impact. So that is the what I call the intermediate metric. It's neither the input metric nor the output metric. Learning input is learning hours, active users, etc. Output is the business metric. But this is a very, very good intermediate metric. And the output metric is you have to actually take the business metrics. So some of our customers, actually not in the knowledge worker world, in the frontline world, a customer like Amazon, for example, which actually uses Disprz, they actually take hardcore business metrics, operational metrics, and if they monitor that, and if that drops, they automatically trigger a learning or a coaching intervention. So they've really done a very good job at scale of matching outcomes to a learning intervention. So that is the next level actually, and it's hard to do output metrics for people like developers for tech-friendly digital organizations. See, there are some workarounds. You can look at velocity of development. You can look at number of reopens. You can look at what is the percentage of critical deliverables delivered, etc. So those can be output metrics. So skill score, role score, and outcome metrics. I would say that can be some of the metrics.
Those are interesting.
Thanks, Sue, for sharing that. And before we delve into the lot of questions that we have received from our audience, before we close this conversation, Margaret and Subbu, what is the directions that organizations need to take when it comes to innovation and overcome skilling gap? Some one or two suggestions that you can share with our audience.
So, do you want to go first?
Could you repeat the question? I didn't get the last part.
Yeah, Subbu, so if you have to suggest the HR leaders and talent development professionals about the priority that for organizations they have regarding innovation and bridging the skills gap to bring that innovation at the forefront, what that would be?
Like I said, fundamentally the same thing that I said before. First, adopt a digital learning initiative. Adopt a learning initiative, and in today's world, it has to be digital. And start with a clear understanding of roles, start with a clear understanding of skills, and go from there. I'd say, and think about the future. So if you're a bank, for example, just don't, and right now, if 90% of your business comes from physical branches, then don't think about branch first operation. Think about where your industry will be 3 years from now, and build backward from there. So it's a little easier to do for a startup, but it's harder to do for a well-entrenched company which has been around for 30-40 years, because there is a lot of inertia and friction in the system. So take a forward-looking view of the industry. If it's travel, I mean, don't think too far ahead. Don't think self-driving cars and robots and metaverse, but think 3 years ahead, and then go backward, and then build your role strategy from there, skill strategy from there, and then take it forward. That's what I would say.
All right. From my side, Anushri, I would +1 to everything Subbu said, and it's also it's a culmination of everything that we've said in this entire session. But if I have to say, top focus would be stay razor focused, right? In terms of what you really want to do and what you want to focus on, because when you talk about skilling and reskilling and bringing in that learning mindset, it's super broad, and you might want to take more time to boil the entire ocean, but you may lose that critical time. So I would say it has to be super iterative, that as soon as you have you prioritize and you iterate. And the third most important thing is, which is the learning for is our personal learning journey as well, is that don't try to build everything internally. I know sometimes you will spend time building a really large learning team with domain experts, with experts on every pillar, but you're losing that that important element that you can crowdsource some of the best minds out there who can help you create some of the best programs. So you would rather focus on what is that right for your stage of the company. Like Subbu said, it will be very difficult for slightly mature companies, much easier to start a company. So basis your stage, your maturity of your product, the maturity of your learning landscape, skilling landscape, decide how much time you want your learning team or your HR team internally to focus on, and what can you crowdsource. As long as you have prioritized it and you start nailing towards, you start nailing down those priorities. That's from my side.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Subbu. That has been a great conversation. A lot of insights, a lot of examples. I'm sure it would be as a great learning experience for our audience also. And before we close the sessions, we have received quite a few questions from our audience also. So maybe I'll take one by one, and please feel free to delve into the conversation if you want to add anything to it. So the first question is about.
That's been taken, Anushri. Sorry, the first question has been answered.
The first question has been answered. Yeah. So the second question is also about digital first startup. So this question was for you, Subbu. As digital first startup, how can we take a more skill based approach towards hiring and internal mobility?
I think it's a great question. So the classic problem in companies that are at least 10 years old is the skill framework used for hiring, and skill framework used for training and learning, and the skill framework used for career advancement are very different. So the first job is to first take an inventory of roles and skills, like I said, and unify it and apply it across all the three. So the same skill should be applied during recruitment, the same skill should be applied for learning, and same skill should be applied for career mobility. I think that is the governing principle. It very rarely happens because you use a different HRMS system, you use a different LMS system, and career mobility is often very informal. That's why a good learning platform, a good learning and skilling platform can actually help. It can act as that unifying thread across different aspects of hiring. The second thing, like I said, is have absolute visibility into your role to skill mapping. That will actually build that clarity.
Sure, thanks. Margaret, I would also invite you to reflect on this question about taking a skills based approach towards hiring and internal mobility, because I feel that this method, skills based approach, is taking a lot of, um, a lot of people are discussing about it. What is your take about it? Margaret, you are on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm saying it is the right approach. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure a lot of organizations, including us, we're talking about how do we take that route. But again, like Subhu said, you need to define your roles uh, accurately. Today, with the number of roles that have surfaced, you're looking at new roles which could be also cusp roles. You're looking at new roles that have redefined. Think the classic example, you talk to startup companies and they'll tell you this problem statement of calling various individuals data science, applied sciences, machine learning, and business intelligence. It's a common problem because you need to take a step back and understand that whether whatever role you're hiring for, have you understood in your organization setting. It could be different, by the way, how roles are structured in every organization. What does that role mean to you, and how are you defining it? That is extremely important. And then from there is a starting point where you use that same approach to hire and get that same talent. And also when you're moving talent, the definition is the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Margaret. So the next question, I think Subbu and Margaret, you have discussed in detail, but the question is, how are you managing employees' personal career aspirations as well as business immediate skilling needs?
So maybe,
Yeah.
Margaret, why don't you go first, or,
All right.
or if I can take it up first as well. Whatever works for you.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so as a startup company, there is actually a lot of enough opportunity for people to actually move, and enough roles that are actually created. So I'll give you an example. We had in our company um, an instructional designer, but who was fabulously talented instructional designer. He used to not just design content; he used to design games. He used to write code for very immersive games. We just said, just become a product manager, and he's now a very successful product manager in our company. So I think the secret there is, if your company is growing fast enough and you're expanding and looking for talent, internal mobility is always better than hiring external talent. And there are several metrics that tell you why that is the reason. So if you have this open conversation, or culturally, if your company is used to managers having an open conversation of where do you want to go in life, what are your career aspirations, you'll always find that while it might be completely different from what that person is doing, there is always a very good chance of an internal opportunity being available. So again, if you have clarity on your company's roles, what roles do you want in the future, you will find that 9 out of 10 occasions, you can actually satisfy the person's career aspiration as well as satisfy your business need by shifting them to another role. So that has to be facilitated through an open culture of the manager being personally interested in a reportee's career advancement. Only then that will happen.
Sure. Right. To add to that, what is key in culture building? Actually, it's beyond even learning. What is important in culture building is for managers to be invested in the growth of their teams, whether it is within their teams or across the organization. Because at the end of it, if a person has committed and joined this organization, there is that already context, culture alignment, everything that has happened. So you'd rather have that person stay within the group, the organization, and help them internally move, right? But what is very important is us a sum total of all of the intel from the managers to know that what are the aspirations of their respective individuals. So when conversations are up in terms of, yes, there is IJPs, but sometimes movements happen when through conversations, you need an individual and somebody else just could fit. So it could be both ways, formal and informal. And when you when you actually have people moving across the board, it becomes a story, a storytelling in its own way, where people know this is a place that I can decide to grow anywhere, because I've seen so many examples. So we've seen we've seen people in QA, in product solutions, in test automation become APMs. We've seen so many cross movements and mobility, because people have, actually learned through Exceed and internship programs and through mentoring programs. They've actually taken that journey, learned, upskill themselves. They have that business context, so they become, they have an edge over people that you would want to hire. So I don't know whether the question was also positioned as how much can you actually bridge that gap. It is dependent on, yes, if there is a need, but there's no harm in making sure that people are ready for that role.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to the next question. In the era of never-ending pandemic, how far cross-training will fetch the employees to boost their inherent talents to their current designated position?
That is a long-weighted question. I'm trying to dice.
Yeah, same here. So I'd say, what do you mean by what do you mean by cross training? Maybe that's where is it cross functional training, or is it? Yeah, we actually might not understand the question.
I think it
Yeah,
would be cross-functional training.
I think we
Given the
understand the
fact, yeah,
question itself. We'll probably go to the next one. If that person can just
sure,
re-articulate it, we could take it later.
sure, sure. So the next question is, how can you expect employees to gain and apply learning if the way they learn is disconnected from the way they set learning goals?
Yeah, very deep question actually.
I think
When
Margaret and Susan would. Yeah.
one of the things which is very important, I think I covered this when we were talking about it earlier, that today it is very important even for learning professionals and HR to understand, and we have been spending a lot of time to understand the day in a life of a individual, of an employee, right? How they take to learning, because you can come up with the best learning programs, but if you've not gone out there and articulated the need, you've not understood how would they want to learn. It depends, right? Different roles, they consume learning differently, but if you've not really broken down that learning, saying that, okay, fine, this is a very deep topic, let's break it down into bite-sized learning. This is something that we don't have the time because we're set for releases. So if at all we can plan it better, but make it a more inclusive approach. So today we're taking support of a lot of SMEs today to understand, hey, will this learning format work? Will this learning module work? Will this kind of context work, or is it too basic that people will not even take up? So that is why you're constantly, there is a disconnect between what learners want to learn, and today what the HR team or the learning team is actually working with leadership probably and assigning, right? It is a known fact that we are moving towards learning where we're tilting it, where we're saying that 20% only will be what will be, like if you look at the norm framework in terms of mandated, owned, nominated programs, the mandated and nominated programs will start becoming 10 and 20%. And the, when you give them the wide spectrum of learning, how they pick that up and they, save it up for learning, that is going to take more precedence. So we need to accept that you can't account for 80% of their time, where they want to account for 80% of their own self-learning. So that right, you need to get that right, but with employees. I hope I've answered that question.
I'll just add to that. I think one good way to set learning goals is not to set them purely as learning goals, but set them as learning goals in the context of a business outcome. So, for example, just say completing the data science course on Coursera is not a good learning goal. I'd rather say completing this data science course on Coursera so that I can build my first machine learning model to solve this problem. Right? That is a better learning goal because it's contextualized to an outcome. Likewise, completing the first time manager course so that I can start managing a team of 2 people immediately. So that way your business outcome and learning goals are set, and that's when alignment happens. That's just my 2 cents on learning goals.
Thanks. Thanks, Yugo. Thanks, Margaret. Those were really interesting questions. And we still have few questions. However, due to the paucity of time, I would invite our speakers if they can take those questions offline this session. And Margaret and Subbu, that has been a great 1 hour conversation, lot of insights. Thank you for sharing so much of best practices and the ideas and also the applications to solve this challenge that we have been discussing. And to our audience, thank you for asking such interesting questions. I think that really helped us to brainstorm about the challenge that we have been talking about. Thank you for engaging with us. And before I close, I would also like to extend this great thanks to Disperse and the entire team for helping us build this content for this conversation. I think this topic is a need of hour that everyone is talking about, and we really need to solve. Also, given the fact that we are entering into the new world, there are new demands with respect to skilling and the new inhibitions arising in the organizations about closing the skills gap. So, thanks again, Sue and Margaret, for sharing the insights with us. To our audience, we'll be happy to have your feedback around the session that we hosted. You will just receive a link on the chat box. I'll request you if you could share a quick feedback about the session. That would really help us plan our other upcoming sessions. So for today, thank you so much for being with us, and have a great day ahead.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much, Anushri. Thank you, Margaret. Lovely talking to you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.